Lily watched from the doorway as her mother, Brenda, laughed, her head thrown back against Uncle Todd's shoulder. The sound bounced off the walls of their living room, stripping away every quiet assumption Lily had held about their family. Her chest tightened, breath catching. Todd met her gaze, a smirk playing on his lips before he turned back. "You're still young. You need a reliable man," he murmured. Wednesdays were Brenda's day off from the clinic. She usually claimed she needed the time for chores around the house. Mark knew it often meant she had the place to herself, a quiet day free from interruption. For me, 15 and growing, it was just another school day, a long stretch until I could get back to my own room. My mom, Brenda, had a way of looking at things. Her critiques were like small, sharp stones, always landing somewhere. Dad, Mark, was different. He was quiet, steady. He listened without judgment, letting me figure things out. His support was a soft blanket in a house that sometimes felt cold. That particular Wednesday afternoon, a dull ache started behind my eyes during third period history. By fourth, my stomach felt like it was churning wet cement. I told Mrs. Henderson I needed to go home. The nurse checked my temperature. "No fever, Lily," she said, but my face felt hot, my hands clammy. I knew I wouldn't learn anything else that day. I decided to walk the 10 blocks home. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I tried calling Mom, but the line just rang, then went to voicemail. I tried again, just in case. Same result. She must be out running errands, I thought. Turning onto Maple Street, my house came into view. That's when I saw it. Uncle Todd's beat-up red Ford pickup truck was parked in our driveway, angled slightly crooked. It was a familiar sight, but not usually on a Wednesday afternoon when Mom was home. A small flicker of oddness started in my stomach, competing with the nausea. I walked up the porch steps. The front door was locked. That was unusual for a weekday when Mom was supposed to be inside. I used my key, the brass cool against my palm. The house was dark, the living room curtains drawn. An eerie silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. I called out, "Mom, I'm home," but only my own voice echoed back, flat and hollow. I moved through the living room, heading for the kitchen to get a glass of water. Then I heard it, muffled sounds from upstairs, my parents' bedroom. It wasn't loud, just a low murmur, then a soft thud, then what sounded like a laugh, hushed but distinct. My earlier unease sharpened, turning into something cold and metallic in my chest. I didn't recognize Mom's laugh. Or maybe I did, just not this version of it. My feet moved on their own, quiet on the carpeted stairs. Each step felt heavy, like I was moving through thick water. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open an inch, just enough to peek inside. The sight hit me with the force of a physical blow. Brenda was there, yes, but not alone. Saw him, Todd. He was her brother-in-law, Dad's younger brother. Their intimacy was undeniable, stark against the afternoon light filtering through the blinds. A low, lust-laced laughter floated from the room, and in that moment, it mocked everything I thought I knew, every quiet loyalty I had built my world upon. My breath hitched, my nausea returned, worse this time. I backed away, pulling the door shut with a soft click that seemed deafening in the silence. Then I ran. I didn't grab anything, just turned, stumbled down the stairs, and threw open the front door. Tears blurred the sidewalk ahead as I ran, each footfall a dull thud against the pavement. The betrayal was a fresh wound, deep and raw. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Once, twice, then again. Brenda. I let the calls go to voicemail. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want to explain. I just needed to be away from the house, away from that image. My feet instinctively took me toward the nature trails, the familiar path worn smooth by years of my own running and walking. I kept going until I reached our trees. The cottonwoods by the creek, their branches reaching high, a secret canopy Mark and I had claimed as our own when I was small. I collapsed at their base, the rough bark scraping my back. Sobs racked my body, shaking me from the inside out. My throat was tight, my chest aching. After what felt like forever, I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Mark's contact. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Dad," I whispered into the phone, my voice thick with tears. "Please come quickly. I need you. I'm at the trees. Don't tell Mom." Mark answered on the second ring. He heard the panic in my voice immediately. "Hey, little rebel," he said, his voice calm but with an underlying tension. "What's going on?" I could hear the background noise of the factory floor, the distant clang of metal. He didn't wait for a detailed explanation. "I'm coming," he said. "Be there soon." He hung up. My phone vibrated again. A call from Brenda. Mark didn't answer it. I saw his car, the old blue sedan, turn off the main road and head toward the Nature Center parking lot. He didn't hesitate, driving faster than he usually would, honoring my plea. I saw him get out of the car, his eyes scanning the tree line. He walked straight to our spot. I was curled in a ball, still crying, my face buried in my knees. When he saw me, he rushed forward. I jumped into his arms, clinging to him like a small child. He held me tight, not asking questions, just letting me switch against his work shirt. "Dad," I choked out, my voice muffled. "I don't know what to do. What if the truth is worse? What do we do then?" I clung to Mark, my face still buried in his shirt. The scent of his work, faint oil and metal, usually comforting, was now mixed with my own tears. "It was Uncle Todd, Dad," I managed to choke out, the words catching in my throat. "With Mom. Upstairs." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes wide, disbelief etched across his face. "No, Lily, you must be mistaken," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, as if saying it quietly might make it less true. He ran a hand through my hair, a familiar gesture that felt me alien in this moment. But my raw pain, the way I was shaking, the snot and tears on his shirt, it was all too real. His denial crumpled, replaced by a slow, dawning comprehension. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hand still shaking as I navigated to the video I'd recorded. It was short, maybe 10 seconds, just enough to confirm what I'd seen, enough to leave no room for doubt. "I recorded it," I mumbled, thrusting the phone into his hand. "Just a little bit," when I heard the laughing. He watched it, his face draining of color, every muscle in his jaw tightening. It was a video no family should ever have to see. The drive home was silent, thick with unshed tears and unspoken trauma. Mark didn't say a word, just gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. His silence was a cold, hard knot in the pit of my stomach, worse than any shouting could have been. When we pulled into the driveway, Brenda's car was there. She was waiting for us inside, standing in the living room, her arms crossed. Her eyes darted between Mark and me. She started talking before Mark could even close the door completely. "Mark, I can explain," she began, her voice brittle. "I was just so lonely, Mark. You're always working, always busy." It didn't mean anything. Just a few times, he understood. She tried to downplay it, her words sliding over the sharp edges of what I'd witnessed. Mark just walked past her, his movements slow and deliberate. He stopped in front of the coffee table, turning to face her. The phone was still in his hand. He held it up, displaying the screen. "You were lonely, Brenda?" His voice was low, controlled, almost a hum, but it vibrated with a dangerous calm. 10 Wednesdays, Brenda. 10 lies. You want to see lonely? Look at our daughter." He gestured toward me, still standing by the door, tears silently streaming down my face. He didn't wait for her to respond. He dialed a number, his thumb pressing hard on the screen. He put the phone to his ear, his gaze never leaving Brenda. After a few rings, he spoke. "Todd, it's Mark." I couldn't hear Todd's side of the conversation, but Mark's side was clipped, laced with an icy fury I'd never heard from him before. Todd's voice was a mumble of denial, then a quick, "It was a mistake, Mark. I swear." Mark just listened, then cut him off. "Mistake? No. This was a choice, a long series of choices." He hung up without another word. Mark was a copyright lawyer. He handled complex cases, dissecting contracts, finding the cracks in arguments. I watched him now, and I saw his mind already working, processing this betrayal through that same analytical lens. His jaw was set, his eyes distant. "Secrets burn, Lily," he muttered almost to himself. "Lies destroy." The phrase hung in the air, heavy and true. I felt the immense weight of my discovery. It was like carrying a rock in my chest, heavy and sharp. I was torn between loyalty to my to the shattered pieces of our family and the overwhelming fallout that my finding had caused. Mark turned to me then, his expression softening, though his eyes still held that hard glint. He pulled me into another hug. "This won't be easy, Lily," he said, his voice a little shaky now. "But we will get through this. We will rebuild." He held me tight, and I knew what he meant. No one hurts his family and gets away with it. That was the unsaid part of his vow. Brenda, sensing Mark's resolve, tried a different tactic. "Mark, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Think about Lily. Please, we can keep this quiet. For her sake. For our reputation." Mark just looked at her, then back at me. He didn't say anything. He just released me and walked past her toward the guest room. I heard the door click shut. The chasm between them, once a subtle crack, was now a gaping canyon. Over the next few days, Todd stopped answering Mark's calls. He withdrew from family, a ghost in the periphery. Mark would just look at his phone, his silence a deep seething. One evening I heard Mark on the phone. "Gary," he said, his voice low, "I need to talk. Remember what you do? Investigations?" Gary was an old friend, a seasoned private investigator. I knew Mark wouldn't just sit there. He'd start digging. He'd find out everything. Later he came to my room. He sat on the edge of my bed and held my hand. His resolve had hardened, settling into the lines of his face. "This won't be easy, Lily. Not at all. But we'll rebuild. You and me." Mark became consumed. The quiet lawyer I knew, the one who spent evenings reading technical journals, was replaced by a man fueled by a cold, relentless desire for justice. He spent hours in his home office, the lamp casting a pale glow on his face, methodically researching legal precedents, cross-referencing statutes. He was building a case, not just for a divorce, but for something more complete. Gary's updates came in hushed phone calls late at night. The affair, it turned out, was not a recent mistake, as Brenda had suggested. Gary uncovered a pattern, a series of discreet meetings, hotel receipts, and whispered phone calls stretching back over 3 years. It was longer, more elaborate than Brenda had admitted. Then came the financial discrepancies. Mark found them, buried deep in shared accounts and tax documents. Small, regular transfers labeled business expenses, but they weren't for our household. They were going to Todd. "She laundered my money for him," Mark said one evening, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, yet laced with a palpable sense of violation. Todd's landscaping business, always teetering on the edge, had been quietly propped up by our family's savings. Mark thought about our small town, the way reputations were built and shattered. Brenda had always cultivated an image of the perfect wife, the dedicated mother, the pillar of the community. She volunteered at the church, organized school fundraisers. The scandal, when it broke, would devastate that carefully crafted facade. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the wall. "She wanted perfection," he muttered, almost to himself. "I'll give her ruin." He was refining his strategy, sharpening his weapons. Mark started the divorce paperwork discreetly. He used a lawyer from another firm, a colleague he trusted to keep things quiet until the time was right. The case he was building was ironclad, meticulously detailing Brenda's infidelity and, more damning, her financial deceit. It wasn't just about a broken marriage. It was about fraud. He leveraged his legal network, contacts in commercial law, property law. He uncovered existing liens on Todd's property, irregularities in his business licenses, a trail of missed payments and overdue taxes. Todd's business was already fragile. Mark was meticulously preparing to apply enough pressure to collapse it. Through all of this, Mark's focus remained on me. He spent more time with me, listening, asking about school, about my friends. He made sure I understood that whatever happened, my future was secure. He insulated me financially, setting up an education fund, ensuring I wouldn't be caught in the crossfire of the impending storm. He didn't want me to feel the financial impact of his fight. Brenda, meanwhile, sensed the shift. Mark's chilling calm, his distance, his unusual silence about their future. He stopped arguing, stopped reacting. She would try to talk, to explain, but he would just look at her with an expressionless gaze, then walk away. Her anxiety grew, a visible tremor in her hands, a nervous tick in her eye. Mark learned more about Brenda's motives from Gary's reports. She felt trapped, neglected, the reports suggested. She sought validation elsewhere, a feeling of being desired and appreciated. Todd had provided that. It was a narrative Mark dismissed with a wave of his hand. Motive didn't excuse betrayal. This isn't about anger anymore, Lily. Mark told me one evening, his hand resting on my shoulder. It's about justice. He said it with conviction, as if the distinction made his path righteous. I watched him, unsure if I fully understood the difference, or if he just needed to believe it himself. The first legal blow landed 2 weeks later. Brenda was served with divorce papers, not in person, but through her lawyer. The documents were thick, detailing every aspect of her betrayal, not just personally, but financially. The affair, the diverted funds, the years of deceit. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a detailed, documented account. Todd received similar papers regarding his business. He panicked. He called Mark repeatedly, his voice desperate on the voicemails I overheard. He faced potential bankruptcy, professional ruin. The house of cards Mark had observed was beginning to collapse. Brenda, cornered, resorted to desperation. She called Mark's parents, my grandparents. She tried to spin a narrative of a troubled marriage, of her loneliness, of Mark's coldness. They were shocked by the revelations, caught between their son and their daughter-in-law, their son's younger brother also implicated. Despite pleas from family and friends to reconsider, to think of the children, Mark remained unwavering. My grandmother called, her voice thick with worry, asking him to ease up. They chose this path, Mom, Mark told her, his voice flat. I'm just making sure they walk it to its logical conclusion. The news spread, not like wildfire, but like a slow, insidious dampness, seeping into every crack of our quiet Midwestern community. Mark's carefully orchestrated legal moves, once whispers, became open conversations. People talked in grocery store aisles, at coffee shops, after church. Our family, once unremarkable, was now a public spectacle. Brenda, who had always valued appearances above nearly everything else, found her world of perfection shattering around her. The whispers followed her. The stares in the clinic parking lot, the sudden silences when she walked into a room, her volunteer work, her church activities, everything she'd built to project an image of impeccable respectability crumbled. She'd always been so careful, so controlled. Now she was exposed. Todd's professional ruin was swift and brutal. Contracts for his landscaping business were canceled, one after another. Clients pulled out, unwilling to associate with the growing scandal. His reputation, once merely struggling, was now irrevocably damaged, not just in our town, but in the surrounding counties where he also sought work. You've ruined me, Mark, Brenda screamed one afternoon, her voice echoing through the house. She'd found him in the living room, calmly reading the newspaper, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. The devastating public fallout had finally hit her, full force. He just looked at her, then back at his paper, without a word. For me, school became a minefield. The gossip spread through the hallways like a virus. Kids would stare, some with pity, others with a cruel curiosity. Lily, the quiet girl whose mom was having an affair with her dad's brother. It felt like being trapped in a fishbowl, everyone watching, everyone judging. I navigated the sympathy and the judgment, retreating further into myself. Mark, though, remained unflinching. He'd walk into town, head held high, acknowledging the awkward glances, the averted eyes. He believed his actions were justified, a necessary part of righting a profound wrong. He endured the social discomfort as if it were a minor inconvenience on his path. The church, a bedrock of our community, was swift in its condemnation. Brenda and Todd, once active members, faced ostracism. Sunday services, once a source of comfort for Brenda, became another arena for her shame. The quiet judgment of the congregation was a heavier weight than any sermon. Brenda's parents, once proud of their daughter's life, were now deeply shamed and disappointed. I heard hushed phone calls, sharp words. They began to distance themselves, their visits becoming less frequent, their calls formal and strained. Their carefully maintained pride was shattered by their daughter's actions. Todd, meanwhile, spiraled. The loss of his business, the public humiliation, the sheer weight of it all sent him down a dark path. He started drinking heavily. I'd see him at the local bar, his truck parked outside late into the night. His decisions became even poorer, further damaging what little prospect he had left. His anger was a destructive force, aimed mostly at himself, but sometimes seeping out, sharp and bitter. I need to make sure Brenda loses significant assets, Mark told Gary over the phone, his voice low, cold, calculated. And Todd needs to lose that business, every last dime. He was stripping away their foundations piece by piece, ensuring their collapse was total. He was methodical, surgical. I watched all this unfold, feeling the immense weight of my family's collapse. My kind father, the one who built me little forts and taught me how to fish, was now a vengeful, cold architect of ruin. It was hard to reconcile the two men. The internal struggle was an emotional toll, heavy and constant. Local media, sensing the sensationalism of it all, picked up on the divorce. Prominent lawyer files for divorce amidst shocking family affair, read one headline in the county paper. It added another layer of exposure, another layer of shame. Our story was no longer just local gossip. It was news. Brenda found herself increasingly isolated. Old friends, once eager for her company, now offered polite excuses or simply stopped returning her calls. The phone in the kitchen, once busy with her social life, grew silent. Mark, meanwhile, secured legal victories. Interim court orders stripped Brenda and Todd of key financial resources, freezing accounts, repossessing property, making sure they couldn't hide assets or rebuild. It was a slow, deliberate strangulation of their financial lives. "Justice, Lily. This is what it looks like," Mark said to me one evening, his hand resting on my shoulder. His voice was firm, but his own face, reflected in the window, showed the deep lines of strain, the subtle tremor in his hand. The cost of this justice was etched into him, too. Brenda's financial woes quickly became critical. The interim court orders meant her assets were frozen, leaving her with limited access to funds. The lifestyle she had so meticulously maintained, the expensive clothes, the salon appointments, the carefully curated home, began to unravel. Her car was repossessed. Bills piled up. She faced eviction from the house Mark had made sure was in her name, but with no way to pay the mortgage. Todd's company, Todd's Outdoor Oasis, officially filed for bankruptcy. It was more than just a business, it was his identity, however flawed. Now he was left with nothing but mounting debts and a tarnished name. His office, once bustling with the faint scent of fertilizer and ambition, was now padlocked and empty. Brenda's emotions were raw, swinging wildly. One moment she was screaming at Mark over the phone, "How could you do this to us? To Lily?" The next, I'd find her curled on the sofa, quiet tears tracking paths through her makeup, sunk into a deep despair. She was a woman unraveling, and the sight was unsettling. For me, the constant tension was taking its toll. My sleep became restless, haunted by fragmented images. Concentration at school was impossible. I developed a nervous habit of biting my nails, peeling back the skin until my fingers were sore. The anxiety was a constant companion, a dull ache behind my ribs. Mark, too, was changing. I'd catch him staring out the window, his expression distant, a flicker of something close to regret in his eyes. He saw my pain, my growing quietness. I think he began to question the cost of his revenge, weighing it against the wreckage it was creating. "Is this worth it, Dad?" I asked him one evening, watching him pick at his dinner. My voice was small, but my gaze, I knew, was innocent, direct. It pierced through his hardened resolve, and for a moment he faltered, his fork clattering against the plate. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the food. Brenda, in her desperation, tried to reach out to me. Her calls and texts, once ignored, now included heartfelt apologies, expressions of remorse. "I miss you, sweetie," one text read. "I know I messed up, but I love you." I read them, but the image from the bedroom, the sound of her laughter, kept me wary, distant. She had chosen her path. Todd, sensing his entire world collapsing, made a desperate plea to Mark. I heard him on the phone, his voice hoarse, begging, "Mark, come on, brother. We're family. Please don't do this." But Mark's response was cold, firm. You gave up that right when you walked into my house. He rejected any appeal to their brotherly bond. That bridge was burned. Through it all, Mark's support network, Gary, the quiet investigator, and Beth, his efficient, unflappable assistant, provided a silent, steady presence. They witnessed his transformation from a focused lawyer to a man obsessed, but they never questioned him. They just kept working, processing the documents, gathering the evidence. The community, once gossiping, now clearly divided. Some condemned Mark's ruthlessness, seeing him as cruel, extending the pain too far. Others applauded his resolve, believing he was simply getting what he deserved. There was no middle ground, only stark opinions. Mark ensured Brenda's every move was scrutinized. Gary monitored her financial transactions, her phone calls, even her interactions with Todd. Mark wanted no surprises, no hidden assets, no escape plan. He was tightening the net, strand by careful strand. Todd, restless and desperate, attempted to leave town. He tried to sell a few remaining pieces of equipment, talked about heading south, but Mark's legal team had already initiated travel restrictions. A lien was placed on his remaining property, a block on his passport. He was trapped. Brenda, with her ruined reputation and frozen assets, found it nearly impossible to secure employment. She applied at other clinics, at retail stores, even for administrative work. Each application was met with polite rejections, or no response at all. The small town meant everyone knew. The relentless pursuit of revenge was taking its physical and emotional toll on Mark. He lost weight, his face gaunt, his eyes often red-rimmed. He slept little, worked constantly. He was winning, yes, but the victory was costing him. There's no turning back now, Mark told himself one morning, standing in front of the bathroom mirror. He said it with a grim determination, pushing away the doubts that flickered at the edges of his resolve. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Mark, seeing the dark circles under my eyes and the way I flinched at sudden noises, finally enrolled me in therapy. Dr. Evans had a calm, steady voice and an office filled with comfortable chairs and soft light. She helped me unspool the tangled threads of my feelings. The betrayal, the anger, the profound sense of loss that settled over me like a heavy blanket. It was a place where I could talk without judgment, a rare space in my suddenly chaotic world. Brenda, now living in a small, impersonal apartment on the edge of town, made attempts to rebuild her relationship with me. She'd call, send cards, sometimes even show up at school. Her pride was gone, replaced by a quiet desperation. She was trying to be a mother again, but her efforts felt strained, awkward. I felt a constant pull, a divided loyalty. Part of me wanted to forgive Brenda, to have my mom back. But another part, the part that remembered her laughter with Todd, couldn't let go of the anger. And I saw Mark's pain too, the lines etched around his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped when he thought I wasn't looking. It was a tightrope walk, and I was perpetually afraid of falling. Mark, seeing my struggle, began to soften, at least toward me. He stopped discussing the granular details of the divorce within earshot, tried to shield me from the uglier court filings. He still spent hours in his office, but he made more time for us, for quiet dinners, for walks by the creek, carefully avoiding our trees. I just want things to be normal again. I confided in him one night, my voice barely a whisper. We were sitting on the porch swing, the evening air cool against my skin. He just nodded, pulling me closer, his arm a solid weight around my shoulders. He didn't say it would be, but his silence held a different kind of promise. School, however, offered no such sanctuary. The pressures hadn't lessened. My grades started to slip, and my social life dwindled. Friendships felt fragile, strained by the unspoken questions, the lingering pity. I mostly kept to myself, finding solace in books, in quiet corners. Gary, usually stoic, expressed concern to Mark about my emotional state. I heard him through Mark's office door one evening. "She's not doing well, Mark," he said, his voice low. "This is taking a toll. Maybe you need to ease up, consider her healing." It was a rare break from Gary's professional detachment. Mark confessed his regret to me one night, his voice thick. "I never meant to hurt you, Lily," he said, his hand covering mine. "The pain, I know it's because of me. The revenge. I never intended for it to hurt you so badly. He lamented the pain his single-minded pursuit had inflicted on his daughter, the unintended consequences of his chosen path. The anger I held for Brenda started to extend to Mark too. "Why couldn't you just let it go?" I asked him once, surprising myself with the sharpness of my tone. "You both broke everything. Everything." The resentment was a bitter taste in my mouth, a burning anger at both parents for the destruction of our family, for forcing me to navigate this impossible landscape. During one joint therapy session with Dr. Evans, Brenda, stripped of her pride, displayed genuine remorse. Her voice was quiet, her eyes wet. "I truly am sorry, Lily," she said, her voice shaking. "I messed up so badly. I never meant to hurt you, not like this." It was the first time I felt a flicker of something real from her, something beyond self-pity. Meanwhile, Todd's life continued its downward spiral. Legal troubles mounted. Begint. A DOA, a public intoxication charge. He was socially isolated, a pariah even among his old drinking buddies. He was a cautionary tale, a shell of the man who once thought himself charming. Mark, seeing my pain and hearing Gary's words, briefly considered a truce. He actually paused, looking at some of the harsher legal documents, his pen hovering. Maybe easing up on Brenda for my sake, allowing her some small measure of peace. The thought flickered, a momentary lapse in his resolve. But with the help of therapy, I was starting to find my voice. I began to articulate my needs, my desires for a peaceful future, a way forward that didn't involve constant warfare. I wasn't asking for a return to the past, just a release from the ongoing battle. "Dad," I asked him one afternoon, my voice raw, the words coming from a place deep inside me, "can't we just stop fighting?" The stress of Mark's relentless pursuit began to exact a physical toll. He lost more weight, his usually neat clothes hanging looser. His eyes were often bloodshot from sleepless nights, staring at legal documents or the ceiling. A persistent tremor developed in his left hand, and he often clutched his chest, a vague anxiety tightening around his ribs. The man I knew was fading, replaced by a gaunt, driven shadow. At the firm, his colleagues, usually deferential, began to quietly question the intensity of his legal pursuit. Whispers reached my ears through Beth, his assistant. "He's going too far," one said. "It's not just about winning anymore." The professional admiration for his legal prowess was slowly being overshadowed by concern for his methods. Gary, ever the observer, noticed Mark's deepening weariness. One afternoon, while reviewing some documents, Gary leaned back in his chair. "Revenge is a bitter meal, Mark," he said, his voice soft, almost philosophical. "You pay for it twice, once in the eating and again in the digestion." It was a quiet warning, a reflection on the path Mark had chosen. Then came the major legal win. The court granted Mark full custody, a significant portion of the marital assets, and awarded him damages for financial fraud. It was everything he had fought for, everything he had meticulously planned, but there was no satisfaction, only an echoing emptiness. The gavel fell, the judge spoke, and Mark felt nothing but a profound hollowness where triumph should have been. Brenda, stripped of her former life, the house, the car, the social standing, began a slow, painful transformation. The initial anger and despair gave way to a quiet introspection. She was living in a small, sparse apartment, working an hourly job at a discount store, far from her clinic life. She started to genuinely reflect on her choices, on what truly mattered beyond appearances. Her calls to me, once desperate, became simpler, more about my day than about her problems. Todd had disappeared from the narrative. His business was gone, his personal life in tatters. He'd moved out of town, a ghost in the collective memory, consumed by his own consequences. He was no longer a factor in Mark's daily life or ours. His absence was a quiet testament to the totality of Mark's destructive victory. Mark started to revisit his pre-betrayal values. I saw him reading old books, ones he hadn't touched in years, philosophy, history. He talked about loyalty, about honesty, about the rules he had always lived by. He was trying to rediscover the man he had been before all of this, before the anger had consumed him. "What kind of man have I become?" he asked himself one morning, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. I heard him through the half-open door, His voice was laced with a raw vulnerability, a question he couldn't answer. I, though scarred, exhibited a remarkable resilience. The anxiety was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I channeled my emotions, my restless energy, into sports. Track practice became my sanctuary. The pounding of my feet on the asphalt, a rhythm that helped quiet the noise in my head. Mark's parents, having weathered the storm of public opinion and family drama, offered support, but also a quiet perspective. They didn't condemn, but they urged him to find peace. Some things, my grandmother said gently over the phone, aren't worth winning if you lose yourself in the process. One afternoon, I saw Mark watching Brenda from his car. She was walking to her bus stop after work, her shoulders hunched against the wind, a plastic grocery bag clutched in her hand. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of his old affection for her in his eyes, a memory of a different time, a different life. It was a moment of raw, unplanned empathy. Mark began to experience the isolation that Brenda once felt. His circle of friends had shrunk, tired of the relentless focus on the divorce, the bitterness. He was winning, but he was winning alone. He realized the cycle of pain, how it had twisted and turned, touching everyone, even himself. He started to reevaluate his own contribution to the pressures that led to Brenda's actions. His long hours, his quiet detachment, his own pursuit of professional success. Had he given her the space to feel neglected, to seek solace elsewhere? The perfect family he envisioned, had he inadvertently helped to break it? Mark and I shared a quiet moment one evening, sitting on the couch, watching a mindless show. He reached out and squeezed my hand. We didn't need to speak. We both knew we had lost something irreplaceable, our old family unit, gone forever. It's not about winning anymore, Mark confided in Gary later that week, his voice rough. It's about survival. The final court date arrived, a crisp Tuesday morning, the air still holding the chill of an early spring. The courtroom was formal, hushed. Mark sat across from Brenda, his lawyer beside him, a thick binder of evidence open on the table. The full weight of his meticulously crafted strategy was about to be laid bare. Brenda, when called to speak, was a different woman from the one who had raged at Mark. She stood, humbled, her voice quiet but clear. I stand before this court and before my daughter, a woman who lost herself, she began, her gaze briefly meeting Mark's, then mine, though I was not there. I lost myself, and in doing so, I lost you. I made terrible choices, and I deeply regret the pain I caused. I offer no excuses, only my sincere remorse. It was a heartfelt statement, stripped of pride, raw and honest. Mark's lawyer, at a prearranged moment, requested to read a letter. It was from me. I had written it carefully, painstakingly, with Dr. Evans' help. It wasn't accusatory, nor was it overly sentimental. It simply expressed my desire for peace, for an end to the fighting, for a chance to heal. The words, read by a stranger in that austere room, carried a quiet weight. As the letter finished, Mark remained motionless, but I watched his face. I saw his jaw clench, then relax. His eyes, fixed on the judge, seemed to soften, almost imperceptibly. He leaned over and whispered something to his lawyer. His lawyer's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Enough is enough, Mark whispered, audible only to his lawyer, but the intent was clear. He was pulling back. He was offering a surprising concession in the settlement, a move no one in that courtroom, least of all Brenda, had anticipated. Todd was present, summoned as a witness for some of the financial aspects. He was a broken man, his clothes ill-fitting, his eyes hollow. He sat slumped in his chair, a stark contrast to the confident, if misguided man he had once been. He looked older, defeated. The sight was a final, quiet disgrace. The judge, clearly observing Mark's shift, delivered a ruling that was fair, but still impactful. It reflected the profound betrayal, acknowledging the extent of Brenda's deceit and the damage caused. But it also incorporated Mark's unexpected turn towards mercy, granting Brenda a more equitable share than Mark's initial demands. She would have enough to start over, a chance to rebuild a life, albeit a modest one. Brenda's small victory, a flicker of hope, was visible in her slight nod, the way her shoulders relaxed. It was a chance, however small, at a new beginning. For Mark, a profound burden seemed to lift. The hollow feeling that had plagued him for months receded, replaced by a quiet internal peace. He recognized that true justice didn't always require total destruction. Sometimes it lay in the cessation of war, in the quiet rebuilding of what remained. I felt a profound sense of relief when Mark told me the legal battles were finally ending. The anxiety that had been a constant companion began to recede. The constant dread, the tight knot in my stomach, slowly loosened. Brenda took a modest job as a receptionist at a small office, finding purpose in honest work, far from her old aspirations of social climbing and superficial perfection. She was building a life, brick by quiet brick. Mark rededicated himself to me. Our evenings were filled with quiet conversations, shared meals, and long walks. He focused on our shared future, the one we would build together, free from the shadows of the past. Todd's fate, however, was sealed. The criminal charges for his financial misdeeds, separate from the divorce, moved forward. He faced the consequences of his actions in a different court, a different kind of justice. Mark realized that forgiveness for Brenda might come someday. It wouldn't be easy or quick. It would be a long road winding through the wreckage of what they had lost. But the path was open now, no longer blocked by anger. "We made it, Lil," Mark told me, holding my hand. We were sitting on the porch swing again, the setting sun painting the sky in soft hues. A quiet understanding passed between us. We had survived. Life on Maple Street continued, not as it was before, but in a new cadence. The house, once filled with unspoken tensions, then with Mark's cold resolve, now settled into a different kind of quiet. It felt more peaceful, stripped of the pretense that had once defined it. Mark and I adjusted, finding our rhythm in shared meals, quiet evenings, and the simple routines of daily life. Brenda, in her modest apartment, rebuilt her life with a quiet determination I hadn't seen in her before. She took extra shifts at the discount store, enrolled in a community college course for medical billing, a fresh start away from her previous professional aspirations. The change in her was genuine, visible not in grand gestures, but in her steadiness, her grounded approach to a much simpler existence. I flourished, slowly but surely. Track became more than just an outlet. It was a source of strength, a place where I could push my limits and feel the pure satisfaction of effort. Friendships, once fragile, solidified with girls who understood the complexities of life, if not the exact details of mine. I was finding my voice, my own path, and the healing was deep, steady work. Mark, though forever changed by the crucible of revenge, found a measure of peace. The gauntness slowly faded, replaced by a softer, more reflective demeanor. His purpose, once focused on destruction, redirected itself. He still carried the scars, visible in the lines around his eyes, but they were no longer bleeding. He was healing too, finding his way back to himself. He often reinforced his core values of honesty and loyalty with me, not in lectures but in quiet moments, over breakfast or while driving me to practice. He spoke of the importance of integrity, of standing by your word, of building trust. It was a legacy he was consciously trying to instill. "Secrets tear you apart, Lily," he'd say, reiterating the old wisdom, his gaze steady on the road. "Always choose the truth. It's harder sometimes, but it's the only way to build anything real." Brenda slowly, painstakingly mended ties with her parents. It was a long road paved with humility and consistent effort. Over time, their phone calls became more frequent, their visits less strained. She earned back their trust, not through grand apologies, but through quiet, persistent change. Mark, too, found a new direction professionally. He shifted his law practice, moving away from corporate copyright law to focus more on family law. He helped others navigate the complex, often heartbreaking landscape of divorce and custody battles. He brought a new empathy to his work, born from his own painful experiences. He understood the stakes, the human cost. Todd served his prison sentence for the financial misdeeds. He was a cautionary tale, a stark example of choices gone wrong. His name was rarely spoken now, a lingering shadow in the collective memory, but no longer an active part of our lives. Mark and Brenda managed awkward yet necessary co-parenting interactions. They met at school events, exchanged polite but brief words about my schedule, my needs. It was never easy, sometimes still strained, but it was functional. For my sake, they found a way to be civil, to prioritize my well-being. My future, once uncertain, now stretched out before me with possibilities. I was looking at colleges, planning a life shaped by my experiences, but not defined by them. I knew what I wanted, what I valued, and I was ready to build something new, something honest. The family still bore the scars of betrayal. They were part of our story, indelible marks. But they were healing, no longer festering wounds. We were a different family now, broken and reshaped, but also stronger in unexpected ways. Mark had accepted that while his revenge brought a form of justice, the real healing, the true peace, came from letting go of the anger, from choosing forward movement over backward-looking retribution. One quiet evening, Mark watched me play soccer from the sidelines, the setting sun casting long shadows across the field. There was a bittersweet pride in his eyes. The past was a shadow, yes, but the future, my future, felt bright, full of promise. Mark and my bond, forged in the crucible of crisis, remained the strongest thread holding us together. It was a testament to resilience, to enduring love, and to the quiet, powerful strength of a father and daughter rebuilding their world, piece by precious piece.